Clark Brewster. This is Bryce Lair, Janice Steidley. We find ourselves in an extraordinary position of having to respond to a press conference that was called in Claremore by the Claremore Police, and we would like to make a few things clear. Janice has chosen to make sure that any police officer that presents a criminal charge or wants to prosecute an individual, she verifies and checks and makes sure that that information is reliable and accurate. She's taken that position, and the police officers of Claremore have taken somewhat umbrage to that. I think the people of Oklahoma should be very proud of this woman, especially in light of what we find ourselves here in Tulsa. We're defending multiple lawsuits in the federal prosecution of people where police officers weren't always truthful. This firm has accepted those cases pro bono for the city of Tulsa, and we're deeply involved in defending those cases where prosecutors just accepted what police officers said and prosecuted people that ended up being released from prison later based upon false information. So when Janice Steidley became elected DA and stood up and said, listen, I'm going to verify this information, and I'm not going to prosecute just based upon some police officer's word. They've now banded against her in some way. We find it interesting that they would call a press conference. If they want to cause an investigation, she's all in favor of that. She's going to be transparent. She's going to be that way every time. So here we stand today to respond to that. If you have any questions, we'll respond to those briefly.
Clark, a lot of this seems to, at least Stan Brown's statement, had to do with the Giglio and John Singer. What is the status of that? Has any district judge reviewed that?
You know, it's very interesting. When you have a situation with an officer that you find would cast doubt on his credibility, the defense is entitled to know that under constitutional mandate called the Giglio case. When Janice Steidley learned of a situation involving John Singer that she felt was game for cross-examination and she was duty-bound to turn that over to the defense, she did so. And that's what's initiated essentially this mutiny. She's going to stand right in the same spot and do it again if she finds that it's the kind of thing that cross-examination should be engaged in. And John Singer ought to invite that, because if he's going to be honest on the stand, he should be able to meet that cross-examination. And I will tell you, the material she released with regard to her obligations under Giglio, she sought the advice of other attorneys, even judges, before she did it. She's a very prudent, careful prosecutor.
How do you see this whole thing playing out, and where do you think we'll be a month from now? Do you think it's
Well, obviously, what's happened is John Singer filed a federal lawsuit that's been essentially entirely dismissed, but one claim based upon First Amendment, which is tenuous. He's tried to get the OSBI to investigate Janice. He's tried to initiate a grand jury investigation. He's held in well stead over there at Claremore among the police circles, but his acts are, we feel, a desperate man.
Now, the AG cleared John Singer. What's your response to that?
I don't think that's true.
It's not true.
No.
Did Janice,
When you say they cleared, there's prosecutorial decisions that are made that may not be made on the basis of somebody's innocence, but they may be made on the basis of whether the matter can be proven or whether they want to go down that pathway. Janice caused that matter to be reviewed, and we will rest with the decisions that they make.
Well,
that's the right thing to do.
what is the decision? What was the decision regarding that?
We're not at liberty to talk about what the AG's report is or what the AG said. And with regard to John Singer, the decisions will be made prosecutorially by other parties besides Janice. She's not going to participate in that decision.
Can you address the level of trust for the folks that are served? Is that able to be repaired at this point?
Well, first of all, and I say this without any hyperbole, the folks of Rogers County and her district ought to be very proud of this woman, because she stood up and said, I will prosecute people fairly, honestly, and I will make sure the information that's being presented in court is truthful and subject to full cross-examination. So to the extent that the police don't like that, as long as she's the DA, they're going to have to live with that, because that's the way this lady will operate.
Now,
and her assistants as well.
It seems as if it kind of started with the John Singer issue, but can you explain the adversarial relationship that's kind of risen out of all of this between nearly a dozen other law enforcement agencies?
Well, you could have started that question off by saying to me, it started in Tulsa with Jeff Henderson, and said the whole thing started with Jeff Henderson, and then involved a lot of different law enforcement agencies, and Jeff Henderson was ultimately prosecuted and people were turned loose. And what happens when you have an officer of that type, they have alliances and friendships, and I'm sure he's calling upon those, but that's not going to change the facts.
Janice, can you talk at all about what it is to work in this kind of environment? I mean, is it hard to do your job? Just give us an idea of...
Well, you go ahead and respond to that, because
We're going to continue to do our job. I mean, that's what I was put in office for. We're going to hold, just as we hold any witness accountable for their actions, we're going to hold law enforcement accountable for their actions. And just so you understand, when it comes to a Giglio issue, okay, whether that arises to a criminal level is a whole nother issue, and that should not be intertwined. You can have credibility issues that are not criminal issues. I sent any potential criminal issue off to the Attorney General's office for them to assign it to another district attorney, which they did. And that is their call to make. I made the call on the credibility issue once we had our prosecutors look at it and we came to the same conclusion that we had an issue that we needed to disclose.
one of the things that Janice has been very careful about is she's been very aware of what's happening in Tulsa in connection with some of the officers' testimony here, and she doesn't want the same thing to happen in Rogers County. She's been very careful about that.
Chief Brown made some comments about other allegations not related to John Singer that would be investigated by the OSBI. Do you have any response to those allegations?
Well, they're just vague allegations that don't deserve at this point a response, other than to say that Janice will cooperate in all respects with the OSBI and any law enforcement agency and be totally transparent. That's been her case. That's the way it'll stay.
And Janice, what's your response to allegations saying that you're treating cases now more as a defense attorney, which you once were, rather than a district attorney?
And I was first a prosecutor first, then I became a defense attorney, and now I'm a prosecutor. So again, I have a duty, I have a higher duty as a prosecutor to make sure that defendants' constitutional rights are fulfilled. If not, we're jeopardizing our cases, and we are also putting our bar license on the line, and I take that job very seriously. So we are prosecuting zealously. I just think that's ridicule from law enforcement. And going back to your issue of, well, other law enforcement agencies have joined in, we have had other issues with law enforcement agencies where I have to hold them accountable for actions. And I don't know if that's something new that they've had to deal with since I've taken office, but that is something that they're going to have to deal with while I'm in office.
And what about the victims who have also come forward? Because it's not just law enforcement agencies. There have been a number of victims who have come forward complaining as well.
Yes, and I understand that, but there is a tight little circle there where everyone is interrelated.
Sort of are you a good old boy network? Is that?
I think.
I wouldn't say the good old boy network, but obviously if a particular victim thinks a prosecution should occur, but Janice looks at the evidence and looks at the credibility of the presentation of the charges and declines it, you may have an upset victim. But that's better to protect the rights and the sanctity of the system than is to please one person who has maybe some motive to prosecute.
And with every victim that has come forward, I can tell specifics about the case of why it was handled the way it was handled.
As far as Chief Brown's comment that the relationship, he wasn't sure how the relationship could be repaired, do you have any thought on how the relationship between you and law enforcement could be repaired?
Let me say this. From the time that John Singer unilaterally filed a civil lawsuit in federal court in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Janice has reached out to these people and tried to have dialogue and said that prosecution will occur based upon honesty and transparency. She's done that numerous times, and I don't think that's going to stop. She's going to continue to try to do that.
I have not caused this. Once we determined that we needed to turn this evidence over, we are the ones that sought the protective order to have this given to the defense attorney so he can review it under a protective order. We are not the ones that brought this to light.
And you're talking about Giglio?
Yes, yes. You know, we were handling it in the court system the right way. We are not the ones that brought this to this media attention.
And you think this was the absolute origin of all this? The Singer thing?
I would assume so. I felt I had a very good relationship with law enforcement up until this happened.
Now, you made some accusations about John Singer, but never did file any perjury charges. Why is that?
We did not want to make a determination of any criminal charges. We had several, I believe approximately 70 cases pending of his within our office. We wanted to try to preserve the integrity of those cases, but also do our job. That is why we sent that out, because I thought that that was the right thing to do, and I still do. Send that out, let the Attorney General appoint another district attorney to review that.
So would it be fair to say you feel like you're being ganged up on by all of these law enforcement agencies?
We're hopeful that that's not the case. She wants to do her job, and she will talk with any one of them that want to. I mean, I guess the definition of ganged up would be to call a big press conference with a bunch of police officers being present. So I'll let you make that determination. One more or two questions, that's it.
Did you think that was a little bit of redundancy today, given it's already a grand jury petition out? I mean, if
Exactly.
there's anything to be found, would it have been found
Well,
by a jury appropriate?
yeah, the issue is if they really felt that there was a grand jury necessary, they could pursue that option. Frankly, Janice would invite that. If they think that they want to get the OSBI to investigate, we think that's totally appropriate. Have the investigation, and we'll be very open and transparent. These two public servants are going to be compliant with the law. That's all I have to say.
You kind of
Janice,
alluded in
is there anything else that you'd like to share that perhaps we did not ask about? You're in the midst of all of this, and we're getting bits and pieces here and there, throwing questions out to you.
I think you've asked the questions that have covered the issues that we have right now. We obviously have a job to do, and Janice and Bryce have a job to do, and they're going to do that job, and they hope that law enforcement will understand and respect the job they have to do.
I know it kind of in the beginning, you kind of alluded to police not being truthful relating to some Tulsa cases, but do you feel maybe that's what's happening in your district?
Well, the upshot of all of it is this. Whether she believes they're being truthful or not, she has a duty and responsibility to disclose to the defense matters that might impugn their credibility, and that's what she's done. And sometimes police don't like that, and that's what's happened here. That's all we got.
Thank you.